Depois dos testemunhos de duas empresas de referência em Portugal, passamos agora para um novo tema. Vamos falar sobre sustentabilidade com Carlos Dias, que faz parte da equipa da SAP e tem o cargo de Chief Sustainability Officer South Europe, Middle East and Africa. Carlos Dias vai juntar-se a nós, em direto a partir de Madrid. A principal questão que se coloca neste momento é se será possível vivermos num mundo liderado por negócios sustentáveis, os chamados negócios de 3 zeros. Zero emissões, zero desperdício e também zero desigualdade. Vamos ouvir a resposta. Carlos Dias, buenos dias, good morning, the stage is yours.
Buenos dias, good morning, thank you very much. So we know that industrial revolution sparked an incredible development for our society. And this has taken hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. But we are doing it in a way that where we are struggling with natural resources. And that's going to bring many companies to struggle and the human species also to have a hard time on Earth. So we want to imagine a world that is greener, a world that is cleaner, and a world that is more equal. That's the world of 3 zeros. Just to double check that you can see my presentation. Excellent. So in this world of 3 zeros, we gonna start with a world of zero emissions. So if we go to the next slide, please. And one more. What we want to understand is why the customers, why the companies are now interested in sustainability. And when they approached SAP or when they start talking about sustainability, they do it for 3 different reasons. Reason number 1, if you click there, you will see that we enter the accountability space. There's a lot of new regulation. You can click once, please. And this new regulation is making these companies think what they have to do to make sure that they catch up with all the things that are happening in this space. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. If you click again, you will see that the second space where they are concerned about is the space of profitability. So until a few months or years ago, they thought that greener meant more expensive. Now they realize if the product has less greenhouse gas emissions, uses less water, travels a shorter distance, why should it be more expensive? It should be less expensive. So they really need to work in the profitability space. And if you click again, you will see that the third space that they are interested in is that they realized that it is not enough with telling your customer, I am going to be carbon neutral in X year, and I'm going to comply with SDGs. That's not enough. You really need to understand what your customer is looking for. And this is the space of desirability. So accountability, profitability, and desirability. But if you click again, you will see in an intuitive fashion, if you click again, that what they are really concerned about is this big space of new regulation. And the other two, if you click twice, you will see that they are diminished, that they are marginal compared to this first regulation topic. So because regulation is important, let's explore now what is happening in terms of regulation. What we can see on the next slide is that there was a certain amount of regulation that is what is called non-financial reporting disclosure. So basically, once a year, You put together some numbers and you show them in your report. That's over. The next legislation is something that is called Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. And why is it so important? Number one is because we need to give much more information. But number two, and this is very, very important to remember, is because we have to be able to audit that information and to trace it back to the origin. So we need a sustainability, not reporting system, but a sustainability financial system, a sustainability accounting system. And there are also other pieces of regulation, like the one that is portrayed here in the image, that is Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation, in which all the banks will need to say where they are putting their money. Am I putting my money into a green investment, into a light green investment, or into a brown investment? And this is going to cause a huge reallocation of investments. So because of all this regulation, if we click and we go to the next slide, customers are really interested in understanding what is happening. Most of our competitors, what they are doing is they're gathering data and they're dashboarding data. If you click again, you see those two first components. And that's good. But as I said, that was good when we had once a year report and we just had to provide some information. Now we need a sustainability accounting system. So we need much more. If you click several times, you will see that we have different things happening. For example, we have the compliance scenarios. So we need to make sure that regulation is embedded in what we do. We need to make sure that we put together different models to work towards different regulations for different frameworks. Very importantly, that we can allocate data. So in the world of sustainability, for example, think about greenhouse gas emissions, or think about waste or water usage. You need to be able to allocate those components to different departments in your organization, to different geographies, to different product lines. And that is something that is not just reporting, that is something very complex to do. And that where you need a sustainability accounting system. But last but not least, you need to be able to merge two worlds that are now disconnected, the world of finance information and the world of sustainability information. At the end of the day, what the C-level executive wants to answer is, how much taxes am I going to avoid? How is my financing going to cost if I'm sustainable? Is my NPS going to go up or down if I take sustainability actions? Are my products going to be accepted in this geography? All those questions, you can only answer them if you understand what are the impacts of your sustainability actions in your financial performance. Because remember one thing, every company can be sustainable tomorrow, but it would go bankrupt. So if we advance to the next slide, we will see that this is the main difference that SAP is bringing to the table. We have something that is called profitability and performance management that we have inherited from the finance world, and we have brought it to the sustainability world, specifically to answer questions like the new regulation of CSRD. We have something that is called corporate sustainability. Specifically to answer regulations like SFDR, we have PAPM financing and investment sustainability. Specifically because we know that you need to show how green are your products, we have something that is called PAPM for product lifecycle sustainability. Also to respond to new regulations like the extended producer responsibility, like the plastic tax that we have in Portugal and in Spain. So we have the right response to this new challenge, bringing those two worlds together, sustainability and finance, and not just a reporting tool. Now, if we advance, we will see that it is much better to have a clean world with less emissions if we produce less stuff and if we produce less waste. And if we go to the next slide, we have learned that despite all our efforts, the world is decreasingly circular. So we are less circular than we were last year. If we click again, we see that we understand that 45% of all the emissions that we cause is because we produce stuff. And if we click again, we see that we are not very good at making sure that that stuff ends up where it needs to end up, which is the beginning of the circle, but ends up in the landfills, ends up in the oceans, and 8 million tons of plastic end up in the ocean. This is high on the public radar. So we click again, we see that we see a flow of data amongst all those things. And this is where we see a big opportunity to provide solutions at scale. So let's click again to understand how this line has to be converted into a circle. That's the whole purpose, to make sure that we do sourcing the right way with the right providers, we produce the right way, we consume the right way, and then we don't take it to the landfill, but we return and reuse to make sure that it starts the virtual circle again. So if we go to the next slide, what we will see is that it all starts with acquisitions. It all starts with raw materials. It all starts with our supplier network. And what we have done with Arriva is making sure that you have a system where you can do the intelligent things and the common sense things. So, am I bringing suppliers that are far away if I can count on suppliers that are closer to reduce the carbon footprint of the transportation? Am I dealing with suppliers that have the right kind of emissions, the right kind of indicators? Am I sure that I am buying the minimum amount of stuff, that nothing's going to be wasted, that nothing's going to go to the landfill? All those things that are common sense have to be embedded in your sourcing system. But not only that, if we go to the next slide, we also want to make sure that you have the right indicators. Sometimes you just don't need you just don't know, sorry, if this provider is better than other, for example, in scope 3 emissions. The scope 3 emissions are those emissions that you're bringing to your company because you're acquiring them through raw materials upstream in the market. We can see that in the next slide. We can see that in the next slide, and we see how we embed EcoVadis information inside Arriva to make sure that you're counting on the right suppliers. If you go to the next slide, we see that it's not only about acquisitions, it's also about production. So in the next slide, you will see how we're launching in a few weeks responsible design and production to make sure that you're putting less materials and better materials in your products, that is economically viable. Once again, mixing financial and sustainability information. And that's something that your customer wants. And that's, again, moving in the realm of desirability. If we go to the next slide, we go to the last part of this virtual cycle, which is making sure that trash is used in a wise way. And in the next slide, you will see something that is called topolytics, where we just mix analytics and mapping and artificial information to follow up that trash and make sure that we can take as much as possible to the beginning of the cycle, because waste is the next frontier, as many customers and many companies are now forced to put that waste back into the loop. Now, this brings us to the last part of this presentation, which is the next slide, which talks about zero inequality, because yes, we can do well with zero emissions and zero waste, but we have to do it all together. So if you go to the next slide, you will see that solutions like profitability and performance management also take a look at the social dimensions of this endeavor. And in the next slide, you will also see how we gather governance aspect. If we are talking about, for example, the compliance issues or the corruption issues, or any other dimensions that are part of the governance. The last 4 minutes of this presentation, I'm going to talk about how to put all this together. And during this event, you have heard about RISE. RISE is the end to end approach to become an intelligent, sustainable enterprise with the lowest possible TCO. Let me give you 4 different dimensions of why I say sustainable when I say intelligent and sustainable enterprise. The first dimension, if you click again, is as I said, you want to be a clean company. And for that, you need clean providers. And Rise is operating on a green cloud. So no matter if it's our own data centers or our partners' data centers, have been make sure that everything operates on renewable energy, and that's going to save 3 to 10% emissions, and that's going to save 3 to 10% costs, and bringing less scope 3 emissions to your business. If we click again, we know that S4HANA is the core of RISE, and PAPM, the product for sustainability accounting, as we have been describing, is a perfect companion to operate on S4HANA. But not only this, some other pieces of technology like environmental health and safety, if you are into the heavy industries of the chemical space, and product manufacturing, if you want to make sure that you put as little as possible in your GHG emissions in your product portfolio. Now, the third dimension that I want to mention, if you click again, is that Rise comes with a starter package that helps you start using Ariba, for example. And we already described how Ariba is the best first place to start converting your linear approach into a circular approach. And not only that, embedded in Ariba, you have all the right indicators to choose the different providers in terms of your GHG emissions and other ESG indicators. And the last point that I want to mention, if you click again, is that also RISE comes with the credits for BTP, Business Technology Platform. And that's excellent because all the new portfolio that we are creating, like SAP Product Footprint Management or SAP Responsible Design and Production that I mentioned, all of them operate on BTP. So the last slide, just to tell you one final message. Sustainability is a race, but differently to all other races that we are running, it's a race that we cannot win on our own. This is a race that we have to win together to make this world of 3 zeros possible. A world with 0 emissions, a world with 0 waste, and a world with 0 inequality. Obrigado.